The strange, disturbing, and creative mind of Stephen King. This was a mind that I never got to enter, never got to see anything of for a long time within my life, until I decided to read and experience his very first work, which was a short story collection book by the name of Night Shift. That's right, Night Shift is the very first short story collection from Stephen King, and that was the first Stephen King work that I read slash experienced, since I never watched, never read, and never, checked out any of his stuff. This is the very first one. I always heard great things about Stephen King, and I even recognized some of these titles. However, after experiencing it for the first time, I gotta say, this is a super solid, super fire, and very, very versatile short story collection that I would recommend to all of you guys to read and check out. Stephen King, a very, very unique writer, because I have to say, Stephen King, after reading all of Night Shift and after almost being done with Skeleton Crew, which is his next short story collection, which I'm reading right now, he's the most artistic author out there. And the fact that every time I read one of his stories, it feels like he gets these ideas that come within his head, and right away, once he gets these ideas, he just writes and dots them down on a piece of paper. Like whatever comes to his mind, whatever comes within a dream, whatever pops up in his head for creativity, he immediately puts it down. There's no really filtering, and that's why some of his stories will come off as extremely strange. That's why some of them come off as super creepy, and that's why some of them are so creative and good that I'm like, wow, this is a masterpiece. And this short story collection has quite a bit of, I would say, versatile stories. And the fact that there are some stories at the top of this list in the book that are absolutely fantastic, absolutely terrifying, absolutely well written, absolutely creepy, have fantastic atmospheres, and the ideas behind them are fantastic as well. And then you also have some stories in there which are good, which are very good. However, they have some weaknesses, but they're still very solid, very good stories. You have some in there that are just good, and then you have some at the bottom which are a strange case because, yes, there are stories in here that got low rankings for me when I eventually do my ranking video for the Night Shift. I can't do that here because it would be an extremely long video, and I'm not prepared for that right now. I just want to talk about the book. But even the stories in here that got low scores, those low scores are not really a testament to anything because I didn't hate any story in this book. Even the bad stories had aspects to them that I liked, and that's why some of them get a little bit higher scores. They don't get 3 out of 10s or 2 out of 10s. Even if the premise or idea is dumb, they have strengths to them, which help it out. So yeah, this is a super solid short story collection. I would recommend all of you guys to go check it out if you want to get scared, if you want to get creeped out, if you want to enter the weird world of Stephen King. This is effectively, I guess, the best way to do it because you would get 20 short stories, get a wide variety of what he likes to write, and then check it out before you read one of his longer ones. I know one of the short stories in here that's actually at the bottom of my list is actually part of a 1,400-page novel that came later on. I'm not reading that. I can't sit through and read 1,400 pages. No. Fuck that. Yeah, fuck that. I'm not doing that. Fuck that. All right. Let's talk about some of the highlight stories and some of the variety of stories in here. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I'll save that for my ranking video, but I will talk a little bit about it. Or I guess I could go into more detail here because a ranking video would just be to the point, saying what's the reason why I like it and that such. But we could talk about the top stories in this book. Now, the top stories in this book, some of the highlights here is one of them. It's actually 4 stories. 4 stories in here are absolutely fantastic. And I would recommend all of you guys to check it out at some point during your life. They are wonderful stories. One of them is called I Am the Doorway. Now, I Am the Doorway is essentially a story about these 2 astronauts who I think go to Venus. And essentially one of them before, one of the astronauts had caught this interstellar virus, right? This interspace virus that infected him. And, this guy comes back down to Earth, and when he returns back to Earth, he's basically decommissioned. He has to sign confidentiality papers because he has to basically go into quarantine. He's been infected. He can no longer be an astronaut, no longer work. And unfortunately, although this is the first negative outcome, there is a secondary negative outcome that comes, which is that this interspace virus is quite unique because what ends up happening is there's a set of 5 golden eyes that start appearing on his hand. That's right. Five five eyeballs appear and grow out of spurts in his hand. And they're these golden, reptile, alien looking eyes, these golden eyes that appear on his hand. And essentially, there is an alien civilization out there. There's an alien species out there that is infected him. And these eyeballs are essentially doorways. They're portals that allow these aliens to look through and view our world. So the eyes that are growing all across his hand, yeah, those are actual alien eyes. Eyes of aliens from another civilization that are using it to stare at the world. And let's just say they may or may not have negative intentions towards humanity. They may not have the best of intentions. They may cause some havoc and trouble that ruins this guy's life. And he has to end up taking some very drastic and dramatic measures in order to try to stop it. And even when he does do so, even when he does take the most horrific decision possible in order to save humanity, let's just say the horrors do not end. And in fact, they may or may not get worse and result in ultimately one of the darkest endings I've read to a story. All right, this is very similar in a sense to The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrell from the first Creepshow movie. And I believe the short story Weeds, which was from a porno magazine. We see you, Stephen King. We see you. So yeah, this is a fantastic story. I hope you guys check it out. It's a really unique take on the whole alien species thing, interstellar virus, that kind of alien world stuff. It's very creatively done. It's a super dark story. Really well written, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, I Am the Doorway is definitely one you guys should definitely check out. Another one, which is a very popular story because it's been adapted into a lot of movies. And this one is fantastic as well. This one is one of the best stories in the book, top 3. Is called Children of the Corn. Many of you may recognize that because there's been a lot of movies made out there. However, all the movies, from what I've heard, have not done justice to this short story. So maybe definitely check out the short story. This short story is super fucking creepy. It is super fucking eerie, super fucking creepy. Like, oh my god, there is some terrifying stuff in here. Like sorry, I'm fucking got a dry cough right there. This fucking story is about this couple who's arguing with each other, and they're basically taking a long road trip. They've been driving through fields of corn for like hours, and then as they keep on driving and arguing with each other and getting more mad, they're basically on the verge of divorce at that point. This kid runs out in front of the car and gets hit. They basically run over this kid that ran in front of their car. They freak out. They get out there, and then once the husband and the wife get out, they start freaking out. They don't know what's gonna happen. He has this like suitcase full of clothing and stuff that's scattered all over. So they basically ran and killed somebody. So now they're deciding: do we call the police? Do we just do a hit and run? That's considered by the wife to just hit and run this kid. And then the husband finds out this terrifying, basically a reveal, which is that the kid's neck was already slit. His neck was already split and he was bleeding out. So really, when he ran in front of the car, he only had like 20 seconds or so to live. So they didn't actually kill him. I mean, they ran him over and finished the job, but his throat was already slit by somebody and he ran out of these cornfields. So is there some serial killer out there who slit his throat out there? Like, are we in danger? Should we just drive away? Like, he's freaking out. So they eventually, take this kid, or they don't take the kid, but they drive basically away with the suitcase, and they're trying to find a police station to report this to. And they end up in this small abandoned town. And this town is super eerie and super fucking creepy. It's got a lot of religious writing, a lot of religious billboards all across it. And then it's completely void, completely empty of people. And then they enter this church. And the secrets they find within this church are terrifying. There is some very disturbing, dark imagery within this dilapidated, abandoned church they find. And let's just say there's a horrific reveal as to what may or may not be happening involving this town, involving the potential inhabitants of this town, the very religious inhabitants of this town, and you may find out the secrets to their dark religion. And maybe you might even find out what they're worshiping to. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. You might find out what these people are worshiping to. It's a very dark, disturbing story, very creepy. It is super eerie and makes you uncomfortable, and that's what you really love about it. And the reveal at the end as to what is going on involving this religious town, and what the mastermind, I guess in a sense, maybe behind this cult-like worship. Yeah, you'll find it on the end. A very kind of Lovecraftian note tied into. There's a lot of Lovecraftian note within Stephen King's work. You'll get that within some of the stories here. And yeah, Children of the Corn, fantastic story. Go check out that short story. And speaking of Lovecraftian notes, one of the major Lovecraftian love letters is the very first story in this book, and it's actually the second best story in my opinion within this book, which is called Jerusalem's Lot. Now, Jerusalem's Lot is basically about this guy who basically moves in to one of his family members' mansions. This mansion has been passed down within his family for a long time, so he basically moves into there. And what he ends up finding out is that this abandoned, this very haunted mansion looking kind of place is shunned by the rest of the town and society. All of the town basically spites it. They think that there's witchcraft that goes on there. There's very dark magic, very sinister satanic things that go on within there. They don't directly say satanic, but you can tell by the way they think that demons live in there, and there's dark magic, and whoever lives in there is cursed, and they're going to curse the town. So essentially the guy is like super kind of weirded out. He's like, I moved into this family house because I had nowhere to go. I was on rough times. And now that I move in here and I'm super happy about it, now people are telling me this stuff. And I kind of feel like, shunned. I don't really feel so good. And they start getting threats from the town people. Like, you can't live there. You can't be here. Get out. Get the fuck out. We don't want you here. You're cursed. And then he starts hearing noises within the walls. And this whole story is written in letters, the same way H.P. Lovecraft kind of writes some of his stories. It's written within letters. This guy is writing letters to his friend. He's writing letters to the friend who actually gave him this house, who actually introduced him to this house. So he's writing letters every day about how things are going. And he has like the servant there who helps him out around the place. He's kind of like a rich guy, so he has a servant. And he starts talking about how he's hearing noises within the walls, and how he thinks that rats are within the walls, and that it's a really bad infestation. He hears these noises every night. And let's just say as the story goes on and these letters go on, it progressively keeps getting creepier and creepier and creepier. And then he starts to find out the secrets of this house, and the secrets potentially of his family. And the guy, the family member who came before him that owned this house, maybe first created this, first got into possessions of this house. And it gets super, super dark, super twisted, super disturbing. There is a basement scene in here that is absolutely fucking terrifying. It is probably one of the most terrifying scenes I've ever read within a horror story. That basement scene is disturbing. There is a scene where I'm just gonna leave it at here. They find this abandoned town. They find this abandoned church. And they find out the dark secrets that may be behind everything going on. That scene is super, super dark. You get a very Lovecraftian ending to the story, and the story ends off with a potential sequel that will be set up, which I think is called Salem's Lot. It sets up for Salem's Lot, which is a novel that Stephen King wrote. So this is actually a prequel to Salem's Lot. And this short story was absolutely fantastic. Such a great short story. I would definitely recommend it. That is easily the most dark and disturbing short story within this entire book. However, my absolute favorite short story, this one actually, I'm going to spoil a little bit for my ranking. This one actually got a perfect 10 out of 10. That's right. I don't give 10 out of 10s a lot. Those are very rare for me. A lot of my friends that are reviewers as well give 10 out of 10s very often. I don't. I usually give them 9.8, 9.6s, 9.5s. But this one actually got a perfect 10. I absolutely love it. I have no flaws with it, and I loved it thoroughly. I think it's one of the best and most unique stories I've ever read, and I think it's the best story throughout this entire book. And it actually recently got a movie adaptation. So this story that got a 10 out of 10 in this book, Flawless Victory. The Boogeyman wins. That's right. The Boogeyman gets a 10 out of 10. It gets a flawless victory. This short story is my absolute favorite in the book. It is about this guy who's basically talking to a therapist, and he basically reveals that he's being investigated for a crime of murdering 3 of his children. Yes, this guy is getting basically investigated. He's gone crazy because 3 of his children have been murdered, and it's basically painted to look like he murdered his children. He's responsible for the deaths of these toddlers and these small kids. However, he reveals that, listen, Mr. Therapist, I didn't kill these children. I didn't kill my own children. It was the boogeyman that killed my children. And you may think I'm crazy. You may not believe a word of what I'm saying. But when I tell you the story about what's been happening to me across these years and what's tormented my family across these years, maybe not, you may be convinced, maybe you may think I'm a lunatic, but I just want to get it off my chest. And that's essentially how the story talks off. This crazy guy who's being investigated for 3 of his children being murdered, and him admitting that he killed 3 of his children, he's basically going to talk about the reality of the situation, which is the fact that the boogeyman killed his children. And it is one of the most dark, twisted stories I've ever read. It's so well written. This guy is super he's painted to be this crazy guy. Even when he comes into the therapist and he's talking with them, he's spacing out for minutes at the time. He's very jittery. He's scared of the closet in the therapist room. He is kind of wary. He tells the therapist, can you open the closet and let me see? Therapist does it. He's like, all right, close it back. And then he starts telling the story. He's staring up and just telling the story about what happened to him and his family. And you hear about the dark, dark horrors of what has been terrorizing their family. You get some descriptions of some very brutal kills done to very small children. You hear about the intensity of what's been going on, about this potential, supernatural being that has been haunting these guys. It's been terrorizing them, that's potentially killed these children. And the very last encounter involving the very last child within the short story is one of the most dark, intense things ever. I was literally on the edge of my seat. I'm thinking bro, I feel like I'm in this situation. I feel like I'm dealing with this. This is terrifying. And it plays on, very childhood fears, but it plays on the dark. It plays on, things that even adults are scared of, universal fears tied into it. And then the twist ending is super fucked up. One of my friends thought that it dropped the score of the story because he thought it was kind of ridiculous, but I actually like it because it adds layers to a certain villain. It adds layers to the villain. It adds layers to what's been going on essentially throughout the setup of this book, and it really does solidify the absolute dark, twisted stuff happening, and how potentially the boogeyman does his victims. I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to spoil it. I want you guys to read it. This was a perfect 10 out of 10 story, and I would definitely recommend you guys read it. I said watch it. Don't watch the movie. The movie apparently does not do this short story any justice. It's nothing like the short story, and for that reason, fuck the movie for doing that. I haven't watched the movie, but fuck the movie for not copying the short story, because the short story is perfect. A lot of other people said the movie's like a 7 out of 10, 6 out of 10. Fuck that. Read the short story. This shit is fucking fire. Absolutely fantastic. I'm looking over here because I have the list of all the stories. So if you see me looking across, that's just because I'm looking at the different stories. Now, those are my 4 best stories within it. There are some other stories in here that are also very good. There's a story called Strawberry Spring, which is essentially about this college campus, which is getting terrorized by a potential serial killer, and it deals with the urban legend of not Jack the Ripper, Spring-Heeled Jack. It deals with the urban legend of Spring-Heeled Jack, which is not one that I often see explored. So yeah, there's a serial killer on campus killing off a lot of people, decapitating them. And there's going to be some investigation, some mystery solving involving the identity of Spring-Heeled Jack and what the secrets are behind these murders. That's a very good story as well. Another very good story is called Quitters Inc. Quitters Inc. is about this guy who has a smoking addiction, and he runs into this lifelong friend that he had at the airport. And after seeing him for so many years, he sees that he's in shape, he looks good. He looks nothing like the guy he used to know back then from work or wherever he knew him. And, he sees him and he's like, what happened to you? How did you get your life back in order like this. You know, you look fantastic. You look great. You look like you're doing great for yourself. And meanwhile, I'm not doing great for myself. I'm still addicted to cigarettes. I'm low on payments. I'm not, you know, I haven't changed my life. So he gives him this business card. And this business card is essentially to Quitters Inc. This business card is to this organization slash, I guess, therapy place that promises a 100% cure to smoking. And when the main character finally decides to go there and signs up for an appointment, he eventually realizes the dark secrets behind why there's a 100% cure to smoking. And it's done in a very creative, a very sinister, very twisted way. A lot of manipulation in there. There's a very terrifying scene involving a closet within the short story that is like real life horror, like it's like real life paranoia that definitely would make me want to quit any addiction I would have. If this, listen, all I'm gonna say is that Quitters Inc. is very effective in its storytelling, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it's very creative, very effective. Tales from the Dark Side actually completely ripped off this story, as I mentioned in the season 1 ranking that I did called Bigelow's Last Smoke, completely ripped it off. But Quitters Inc. is better than that, so I would definitely check out that short story, Quitters Inc. It's better than Bigelow's Last Smoke. This story is great. Another great story you have is called The Ledge. The Ledge is basically the most realistic horror, well, like the second most realistic horror thing, horror story within this book, which is about this guy who essentially has been having affairs with this rich tycoon guy's wife. This rich tycoon basically invites him over and threatens to essentially kill the lover, kill his wife, and also threaten to kill this guy and his family if he doesn't participate in this very twisted, dark game that he wants him to participate in, which may or may not revolve around walking around the 6-inch ledge of his apartment building and not falling off. And if he's able to make it, then he'll keep him alive. And that's one of the most realistic horror stories in the whole book. It's super, super intense because you imagine yourself within the situation, and it's very easy to imagine yourself within the situation, and it's one of the most intense stories throughout the entire book. So that's another great read. And there's a lot of great stories throughout this book. I Know What You Need is a tale about this stalker, or essentially this stalker who comes in the form of this potentially great boyfriend for this girl who always seems to know what she needs, always seems to know the right decision that she should be making within life. And he's able to predict certain stuff that makes her basically obsessed with him. And you may find some of the dark secrets behind why that's possible. And there's a great dream sequence of her basically meeting with him, and then when she turns around, she ends up in this she basically ends up in this this grave, this 6-foot grave, and she's looking into his eyes. She's looking into the eyes of a giant wolf. That's a fantastic scene that represents some of the stuff involving that story. There's another one called Sometimes They Come Back, which is a super dark, twisted horror story about essentially this idea of this teacher who's working at this school full of delinquents, and his little brother back in the day got murdered off of some school bullies that ended up becoming this big case. And let's just say that, you know, these things may be coming back to haunt him, and he has to find a way to take care of the demons of his past, quite literally in some sense. So those are some of the best stories. You also have some sad stories in here, like The Last Rung on the Ladder and The Woman in the Room, which are not really horror stories. They're just sort of emotional, sad stories that I still gave good scores. They're very well written, but I couldn't raise them higher because of that. There's a dark one in this book called The Graveyard Shift, which I didn't give it the highest score, but I still really enjoyed it. It's a pretty good story about basically rats. These guys are in this workplace that's infested with rats, and they have a really shitty boss who's always like, you know, taking advantage of them. And one day they have to just decide to find out the source of these rats. And when they do, it's a lot more dark and disturbing. You get some very disturbing body horror involving that story. And yeah, let's just say rats, normal rats, maybe the very last of the issues involving this goddamn place. That's all I'm gonna say. And then also you get some kind of weaker stories in the book. The weakest stories in this book are ones that are still enjoyable. You have Battleground, which is about this guy, this business tycoon who runs a toy company, and he's basically taken advantage of a lot of people across the years. And one day, you get this he gets this phone call from this gypsy woman who said that her son was basically killed by this guy, got his life ruined by this guy, and there may or may not be a curse put, and he has to deal with some repercussions that may or may not come in the form of toy soldiers come to life. It's a very fun story, and I did have fun with that one. That one's a very fun one. You have The Lawnmower Man, which is easily the weirdest fucking story in this entire book. It's about this guy who has basically he had a lawnmower that he always cut the grass with, and one day this cat ended up running under there, and it became such a dark, disturbing sight that he never used a lawnmower again. He sold it, and he hasn't cut his grass in a long time, and his grass gets too long. He can't hold on to it any longer, so he hires this lawnmower company that he read in the newspaper, and the lawnmower guy comes, and it goes down a very fucking weird, erotic, strange route that I oddly sort of liked, but it's very fucking strange. You have a story called Trucks, which I think got adapted into some movie. Trucks is about basically these trucks, semi-trucks, and vehicles that have come to life and are basically killing people. It's a very fun story. Basically, these trucks and things are killing people. You get this very intense ending towards the book where, let's just say, a new vehicle comes in and potentially risk them existing. And then the ending to the story is one of my favorite endings. It's like it should be corny, but it kind of works in a way. Like the way it's done, I like that ending. It's a very sort of like haunting, dystopic kind of take towards the story. And even though it should come off as corny, I quite enjoyed it. And finally, the bottom story in this entire short story collection is called Night Surf. Night Surf is basically a prequel to a book. It's about this virus from China that has essentially killed a lot of people, and now that there's only a few remaining people left on Earth that have to survive within the lonely world. This is basically the worst case situation of COVID-19 that Stephen King somehow predicted back then. So yeah, that's what Night Surf is about. This one got the lowest score because it's a very incomplete story. It's not terrible, but it's very incomplete, and I can't give it a high score for that. But yeah, even that one, some of you may enjoy more. Some of you may find it, and if you've read his 1,400-page novel sequel, you may enjoy that one more than I did. But yeah, I pretty much covered most of the stories, if not all the stories, within this short story collection. Oh, there's also called, I forgot, the last story is called One for the Road. One for the Road is basically a sequel to Salem's Lot, which is basically a vampire story that takes place in a blizzard at night. Very, very terrifying. That one was a pretty good story. Very creepy, very eerie, very dark. If you like vampire stories, you'll like that one. And Gray Matter. Forgot about Gray Matter. Gray Matter was adapted into Creepshow Season 1's show. And that one is a good story as well. It's about this guy. Basically, there's a strong blizzard going on. There's this gas station full of people and a local sheriff. And this kid comes in who says that his dad drank a bad can of beer and he's been mutating into something else. There may have been a mutagen in that beer can that has transformed him into quite the disgusting monster over time. And they have to find a way to deal with it because it may result in cataclysmic potential events. So yeah, those are all the stories within Night Shift. Absolutely fantastic short story collection. I recommend you guys check it out and read every story. Take your time, enjoy them, read them. You'll get a wide variety of good stories. And yeah, I have to say, this is my first experience of Stephen King, and I absolutely enjoyed it. I'm not disappointed. This was a great short story collection. I got to read a lot of fantastic stories, like the top 4 that I mentioned. The ones that I mentioned after are still very good, and even the bottom stories are very fun and very well written. Stories like The Mangler. The Mangler is a short story about a fucking killer washing machine. It's about a killer fucking laundry press washing machine thing. I think it's like an industrial laundry press that's evil, that's killing people, and they have to investigate the mystery behind it. That is such a fucking stupid story concept, yet the writing in the story is actually super well done. So even when Stephen King writes bad stories, in this case, they are quite well written and quite fun. So yeah, everybody go check it out. Go pick up a copy, go read it now, and enjoy the wonderful weird world of Stephen King. That's all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. All the Stephen King fans out there, you can relax. I like Stephen King. I enjoy him. And for all of you out there who have been loyal to my channel, this is my first sort of adult horror novel exploration on my channel. Since Creepshow I did the movies, and now this is my first adult horror. I will be doing more Stephen King stuff, so you can look forward to that content coming forward. So yeah, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It's a free way to support me. Lets me know you guys enjoy the channel and you guys like the content being put out. And also comment down below your own thoughts, opinions. If you've read Night Shift or any Stephen King, let me know. And if you haven't checked it out, then check it out. Then let me know your thoughts as well. That's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed. And yeah, deuces. If there's anything this shit has taught me, stay the fuck away from abandoned churches and closets and dark spaces. Please, have fucking common sense. That's why only white people can be in this scenarios. You won't catch my ass anywhere near that. Did you guys hear the closet open?